I believe in America. America has made my fortune.
In Francis Ford Coppola's Godfather trilogy, we witness the transformation of the Corleone family across generations and across continents. Vito's childhood in his ancestral village is a world away from his grandson's privileged childhood in Nevada, owing to the empire building of the cunning Vito and his clandestine migration as a boy. This transformation, however, has its victims. The Corleone family and their milieu find themselves caught in the no man's land that separates these juxtaposing cultures, value systems, and traditions, as did Francis Ford Coppola and the writer Mario Puzo. This existence is essentially schizophrenic, and this idea is communicated through the subtext of the film. Michael appears to be the most affected by the dual consciousness of the Italian-American psyche. Michael is too Sicilian to coexist harmoniously with the blue-blooded Kay Adams, and simultaneously too American for Appolonia, his Sicilian bride, who loses her life as a result of a conflict taking place in the underworld of a distant metropolis. Apollonia's death seems almost like the machination of Olympian gods wanting to balance out the order of the mortal world by punishing the hubristic Michael, who attempted to grasp a life beyond what was fated for him. The paradox of the hyphenated Italian-American identity is outlined in the opening scenes of the first film, which take place at Connie's wedding, and the conflict of the entire trilogy is largely rooted in that diasporic paradox. Let's have a look at how Coppola and Puzo use Connie's wedding to introduce this perspective into the film. The film's opening image is of an undertaker begging Don Corleone to murder the two men who violated his daughter, whom he attempted to raise in the American style while also maintaining the traditional values of their homeland. The assault of his daughter, plus the legal system's failure to deliver justice, has unmasked the American dream in the eyes of the undertaker. The mutilated face of his daughter symbolizes the corruption, hypocrisy, and betrayal of America's legal system and American society, and so the undertaker seeks Sicilian justice from Don Corleone. America, like the boys who assaulted the undertaker's daughter, smiles at its victims, presenting itself as kind and virtuous despite its underlying violence and rapacity. The Undertaker, in the opening line of the film, says, "I believe in America. America has made my fortune."
I believe in America. America has made my fortune.
However, his daughter, while attempting to experience American culture, exemplified by going to the movies, is assaulted. This tragedy is a microcosm of the tragedy that befalls the Corleone family. Vito, who also raised his children as Italian Americans, witnesses his eldest son's disfigured face while in the presence of the Undertaker. Vito's other sons are disfigured internally. Undoubtedly, Vito would have given up all of his wealth to prevent Michael from assassinating Fredo, if he were alive. The Undertaker's story represents the conflict between the ugliness of American consumerist mass media society on the one hand, and Italian honour on the other. When Michael is in Sicily, we see how protected the women are there in comparison to the women in America. Although what they're doing seems very old-fashioned and restrictive, the women who follow Michael and Appolonia on their romantic stroll are more aware of how women can be preyed on by men than anyone stateside. From the onset of the film, it is made clear that Sicilian honour cannot coexist with the American way of life. The Undertaker realises that he has been deceived by the falsehood of the American dream. He feels that he has been made a fool of, and he returns to the traditional ways of obtaining redress, regretting that he ever fell for the American dream in the first place. The next request that is made of Don Corleone comes from the baker. The baker implores Vito to use his influence to prevent his daughter's fiancé, Enzo, from being repatriated to Italy. The significance of the baker's story is fairly straightforward. Enzo has migrated from Italy to America. Meanwhile, his Italian-American daughter is connecting with her heritage by marrying an unhyphenated Italian. The baker's dilemma reinforces the motif of Italian diaspora while also illustrating the corruption of America. Enzo is being repatriated to Italy even though he served in the American war effort, and the underhanded intervention of Don Corleone is what allows him to stay and experience the so-called American dream. The music at the wedding is another method used to juxtapose American and Italian cultures. The band oscillates between playing contemporary jazz music and traditional folkloric Italian songs. This mirrors the theme of dual consciousness. Michael Corleone, who arrives dressed in his US Army uniform with an American girl by his side, exemplifies the extent to which the family have assimilated into their adoptive country. However, as Michael describes certain aspects of his family life, it becomes apparent that the Americanization that Michael represents is superficial, and he begins to seem more like a gangster masquerading in his military uniform rather than the aberration from his family that he presented himself as to Kay.
You know, Mike, we was all proud of you being a hero and all. Your father too.
Vito's pride in Michael's wartime heroism, his disappointment in Michael becoming involved in crime, and his dream of Michael becoming Senator Corleone illustrate that Vito is acutely aware that Italian doesn't mix with American. Michael had been earmarked by his father to be the one that obtains legitimate power in the American system instead of underworld influence. When this is made impossible because of Michael's killing of McCluskey, Vito accepts that Michael no longer has a foot in the American system instead of vainly trying to bridge the incompatible trajectories. The character Johnny Fontaine embodies the dichotomy of the Italian-American identity that is explored in The Godfather. On the one hand, Johnny Fontaine represents the glamour of show business. On the other hand, Johnny Fontaine is connected to the criminal underworld. Johnny Fontaine appears to be living the American dream. However, his stardom was achieved through the muscle of the Corleone family. Beneath the celebrity facade, Fontaine owes his career to his godfather, Don Corleone, and his fealty is towards these traditional ties that originate from their homeland. Additionally, the song that Johnny Fontaine sings, in conjunction with the other thematic elements, alludes to the predicament of possessing a dual consciousness. The song that he sings is about having one heart.
I have but one heart.
The schizophrenic nature of the hyphenated identity is driven by the fact that human beings have but one heart. It is impossible to possess inner harmony when one's heart is torn between two contradictory visions. In other words, we must exist as a singular entity, and we experience turmoil when we are divided. To be an Italian-American drives internal tension because one is expected to have two hearts, when in fact this is impossible, according to the ethos of the film. Finally, the fact that the non-Italian Tom Hagen is Vito's most reliable son adds to the paradox being explored. My hypothesis is that Tom Hagen, who was an orphan brought into the family from the streets, is more aware than any of his adoptive brothers that the American dream is a falsehood. Tom Hagen is aware that loyalty to one's family is paramount. The philandering Sonny, the treacherous Fredo, and the fratricidal Michael have something to learn from Tom. Tom Hagen introduces a postmodern view of identity into the film. Tom Hagen has adopted the idiosyncrasies of an Italian through learned behaviour. The Corleones have become American, and this is mirrored by Tom Hagen, who has become Italian. Identity in the film is presented as something that is constructed rather than something primordial, and Tom Hagen demonstrates this perspective most clearly.
Hey, Boo.
Miss Jean Louise, Mr. Arthur Radley.
The paradox of dual consciousness in the fractured Italian-American mind is established during Connie's wedding, and this paradox defines the family dynamics, the underworld affairs, the romantic relationships of Michael in particular, plus Michael's transformation into Don Corleone. If Michael had been an American, he may have become president. If he had been a true Sicilian, he wouldn't have murdered his own brother. Unfortunately, Michael's story is tragic because the two identities cannot be comfortably reconciled in one person, according to the worldview that Puzo and Coppola present in The Godfather.
I can't believe out of 30 professional musicians, there isn't one Italian in the group here. Come on, let's have a Italian dance. What? You up, clarinet up.